the B1M. I don't know what that is. The $64 million race to save the Eiffel Tower. We did
Tower
watch
is in
a
danger.
couple other Paris videos today, two other Paris ones about like the scams and stuff that goes on around it, and how the cops like kind of treat it, which we pretty much don't do anything. But yeah, this correlates to the other video we watched, kind of, just because it's Paris and Eiffel Tower, right?
The landmark has
See
survived
how
an
this is.
occupation, 2 world wars, and the prospect of demolition back in 1903. But all of those threats pale in comparison to the tower's greatest enemy, rust.
Yeah.
For more than a century, this iconic monument has been fighting...
It's over there getting rained on, heavy fucking weather, winds and everything. People walking on it. Yeah, it's getting fucked by rust. And like, yeah.
An uphill battle against the wind and rain of Paris.
Yeah.
A battle that it might now be losing. This is the $64 million fight to save the Eiffel Tower.
Okay. It's such a big historical point too. It's like it's kind of it's a thing you kind of have to save, you know?
So, the Eiffel Tower was never supposed to be standing for this long. It was meant as a temporary monument for the 1889 World's Fair, to rise over Paris for just 20
That's
years
crazy.
before being torn down. Now, 135 years later, it's not only still standing, but has cemented itself as one of the most beloved and iconic structures in the world. But the tower is starting to show its age.
The famous Paris landmark and the symbol of love, the Eiffel Tower, is crumbling, and the only solution to stop its
crazy,
decay is
dude.
a full renovation.
Ideally, the tower was meant to be repainted every 7 years, but the last
Eiffel
restoration effort
Tower
was delayed
is
thanks to the
bottom.
pandemic. Now it's in the middle of a $64 million repaint to make it presentable for the 2024 Paris Olympics. However, some experts have criticised this repaint as being little more...
That's insane. I didn't realize they paint the entire Eiffel Tower. Did they do that before? I'm pretty sure they did, right? He was saying that. That's fucking crazy.
The cosmetic touch-up, which doesn't address the advanced state of rust the tower is now in. In
Wow.
a confidential report leaked to French magazine Marianne, one unnamed manager said that if Gustave Eiffel, the engineer behind the tower, had visited it today, he'd have had a heart attack. Now,
Yeah.
Gustave Eiffel actually anticipated that rust would be a problem for this tower, and he put in
Of
place
course.
plans to cope with it. But first, he had to convince Parisians not to tear it down altogether. It's the 80s. Not those 80s, the 1880s. Paris was set to host the World's Fair at the end of the decade, and the city needed something spectacular. It was to be the centenary of the French Revolution, and Paris wanted to show off the engineering skill of the French people.
Well, engineering was really on steroids in the late 19th century, and the French called it La Belle Époque. So confidence was high, progress was embraced, and I guess personal and corporate and national wealth was also growing. They seemingly, for
Yeah.
a while, engineers...
It's a crazy
almost
bridge,
could
dude.
do anything that was asked of them.
Gustave Eiffel won a competition to design a glittering new monument with his plan for a 1,000-foot tower that was
That's
to be
crazy.
by
Winning
far the
winning something and being able to being able to build, whatever you fucking want there, right? Just in a huge part like that. That's
tallest
great.
man-made
That's insane.
structure on Earth. It would handily beat the then current tallest, the Washington Monument. And actually before that, the tallest structures in the world were all churches and the pyramids.
The pyramids
Eiffel
are that
Tower
small?
was special because it was.
I mean, it's not
by
small.
some considerable margin,
I didn't
the
realize it was that
tallest
much smaller.
man-made structure in the world at the time. It was 1,000 feet high when completed, 300 meters, and retained that position as the tallest man-made structure for 40 years.
While Eiffel is now synonymous with the tower that takes his name, he was also one of the greatest engineering minds of the 19th century. Among his many achievements were the Porto Viaduct and the Statue of Liberty. His initial designs for
Wait,
the Eiffel
the guy that made the Eiffel Tower made the Statue of Liberty? I did not know that shit. What the fuck?
greatest engineering minds of the 19th century.
That's actually insane, dude.
Among his many achievements were the Porto Viaduct and the Statue of Liberty. His
Or
initial
Statue of
designs
Liberty.
for the Eiffel Tower
Fucking
took
insane.
his engineering concepts to incredible
Wow.
new heights. The first challenge was figuring out how to build something that tall that wasn't also impossibly heavy. When the Washington Monument was being built, it kept sinking into the ground because of the enormous weight of all the marble and granite it's formed from.
Yeah.
Eiffel solved this problem by making his tower out of iron, a lightweight but strong material. It looked quite literally like something from a Jules Verne novel. A large pylon with 4 columns made of latticework girders that met at the top. To make it more palatable to the general public, architect Stephen Sylvestre was brought on board to tidy up the design. He gave us the stonework legs, the arches that link the columns with the first levels, and the bulb-like crown at the top.
The first thing to point out is that the original concept for the Eiffel Tower was not Gustave Eiffel himself. It was 2 of his employees, Maurice Kirchlin and Émile Nouguier. And they worked in their own time and prepared designs for this idea that they had for the 1889 exposition. And they showed their drawings to Gustave. Sylvestre was asked to improve the aesthetic of what they had come up with as engineering solutions to a very tall tower.
Because nothing like this had ever been built before, Eiffel had to take special consideration of the enormous wind pressures the tower would face at varying
definitely.
heights.
The wind resistance is a really
Because
neat
even
feature.
buildings nowadays have a hard time with that. You know, the fucking swaying, right? Rocking back and forth. I mean, granted, there are buildings out there made to sway for like earthquakes and stuff. Because buildings that sway are far sturdier, stronger than buildings that just stay put because, you know, it will shift on its own from earthquakes and stuff and it just fucking break compared to something that goes along with the current, like the whole, you know, thing. So I wonder if he did that with this. Probably not. I highly fucking doubt it. Just you see videos of the Eiffel Tower swinging or like fucking wiggling. That'd be insane.
Picture of Eiffel's approach to the design and the analogies with great trees like great oaks or sequoias where the trunk gets progressively broader and broader as it gets to the root
Makes
system.
sense.
The distinctive curves are the product of Eiffel's mathematical equations to create the most wind-resistant form. If the tower had been built as a simple straight line, it would have wobbled dangerously back and forth.
Of course. I wonder if people tried redesigning the Eiffel Tower. Like, what would be a more structurally safe Eiffel Tower, right? With still, you know, being at height and whatnot. Like, would they make it a different material? Would it be the same? Would it be skinnier? Would it be, you know, as sturdy and whatnot?
Forth.
Gotta wonder.
This design tricks the wind into travelling downwards. The lattice structure also evenly
Tricks the
distributes
wind.
loads across the framework so that when high winds do hit, it remains stable. Today, those calculations would be tested out with
That's
models
fucking
on
huge.
computers well before the tower was constructed. But back then,
Yeah.
Eiffel only had his theories. They were gambling 2 years of work and the modern equivalency of $37 million.
Isn't that insane? How smart people used to be back then. And I mean, there's still insanely smart people now, like smarter people. But instead of like gambling on like what is work or not, you can just run it through a simulation and like I give you like a percentage on like how much, like what percentage of it would work. Like would this kind of design work? It'd be like 77%. I mean, that's not how all of it works, but you know, pretty much, right? It runs a simulation, gets back to you on it. But back then they had to actually fully think about will this work and like run simulations through their own brain and their own like equations and stuff. And this is what they came out with, man. You know, this is what they came up with. And it's still standing. It's insane.
The pressure was immense. Construction began on July 1st, 1887. While the Washington Monument took several decades to build, the Eiffel Tower took just 22 months.
But it was really
22 months? Wait, what was the other one he said?
Began on July 1st, 1887. While the Washington Monument took several decades to build, the Eiffel Tower
Wow.
took just 22 months.
Decades to
But it
22
was really
months.
cleverly built. It was efficiently
Wow.
built in only 2 years, which is quite impressive. And
He's
it
a
had a
smart
fairly
man, dude.
small workforce of a few hundred only. Steel workers and then teams of painters, of course. And Eiffel used some really smart techniques for craneage that was designed to
That's
climb
cool.
the sides of the tower on
He didn't just do like, you know, the design of it. He did, you know, the exact process of everything being built. How you would get this here to there and everything. I mean, that's how designers usually work. Usually, but it's also something for other people to have to do. So like you pass the design on, and then someone else has to figure out how you get this done. Pass it on. Someone else has to figure out how to get that whatever the last person said has to be done. But this guy did it all himself. I mean, of course, he had like a small little team. He had 2 apprentices, someone else, I'm pretty sure, right? But yeah, that's fucking insane though.
lift rails as progressively
He pretty much did everything himself.
tower emerged
Pretty much.
and got higher and higher.
But the structure wasn't built where it is today. Every part of it was made in Eiffel's factories on the
of
outskirts
course.
of Paris.
That's
All
far, dude.
18,000 pieces were then taken to the Champs de Mars and assembled to an accuracy of 1/10 of a millimetre, like a giant Lego set. At one point, there were up to 300
That's
workers
crazy.
on site using small steam cranes and scaffolding to build the tower. More than 2.5 million rivets would hold it all together. Then, on December 7th, 1887, all 4 of the girders met in the middle and began their vertical ascent upwards, racing into the sky. Finally, it was given 4 coats of red lead
That's
paint.
cool.
That's right, the Eiffel Tower once more closely resembled the Golden Gate Bridge than the bronze structure it is today. The
That's cool. It
tallest
definitely
tower
resembles like a circus kind of, you know, thing, like what they're, you know, going for. But that's insane. A red Eiffel Tower.
resembled the Golden Gate Bridge than the bronze structure it is today. The tallest tower on Earth and a wonder of the modern world was then marked complete, and the French absolutely hated it. Parisians
Why?
are not known for their restraint when it comes to handing out critiques. It is, after all, a French word. The tower was labelled a truly tragic street lamp, a half-built factory pipe, and incomplete, confused, and deformed. To his credit, Gustave Eiffel worked tirelessly.
What? Deformed? Incomplete, confused, and deformed. I don't think people understood what it was actually there for. It's like saying that to, you know, Statue of Liberty or whatever else. Confused, incomplete, or deformed, or whatever. But I mean, that's what it was. Like the Eiffel Tower is supposed to be. It's like a whole lot of scaffolding, pretty much just slammed together, and tried to build as high as you could, being structurally safe and everything. A half-built factory pipe. I mean, I'm not saying they're wrong. You know, from an outside view, you could definitely just say it's like scaffolding for something else, you know? You definitely could say that because it makes sense. That's how it looks. But it was made for a specific reason, and it was to be that high and be safe.
Confused and deformed.
And also I don't remember what he said in the beginning what it was for. Was there something else too?
To his credit, Gustave Eiffel worked tirelessly to defend his structure. He asked his detractors could there not be beauty within his engineering marvel.
Public opinion was, I think, a different story, and that was steadily improving as the tower was growing.
Yeah, like paused a couple times, I know. But it's hard for a non-engineer to appreciate an engineering mind, you know? It's like someone who makes a phone, right, or builds like a rocket ship, right? Say Elon, for example, right? I know he's not the only one who works on the rocket ship and whatever. I'm sure he gives ideas and whatnot here and there, and he pays people, right? But it's like people who very much love rockets and see how those work and know, you know, somewhat how they work and everything, and someone else saying how stupid it is and everything. Like, it's hard for people to understand what they don't understand. You know, it's just simple as that.
By the time it opened in 1879, it had 2 million visitors
You
in
can't
the first
understand
6
something you
months.
don't
Now,
understand.
that doesn't suggest it was an unwelcome imposition on the general Parisians or visitors to the exposition. So it very, very quickly
Wow, it's
became
all
a
grey.
worldwide icon.
The tower was set to be torn down in 20 short years, and in 1903, plans for demolition were seriously considered. To try and save the tower, Eiffel funded several scientific uses for it, ranging from meteorological observations to wireless
Now it's
telegraphy.
brown.
It even became of particular military interest when they found it could transmit and receive long-distance signals.
Huh.
All of these efforts ultimately helped to save the tower, and even to this day, it plays a vital role in television and...
In the beginning, didn't he know it was gonna get torn down, like, in a certain point, not like a couple years later down the line? But I mean, if I worked that hard and tirelessly on something, I definitely would have tried my hardest to make sure it's saved, you know?
and radio broadcasts. Now, after
Wow, that's
decades
crazy.
of hard work, all Eiffel could hope for was that future generations would take care of his monuments as well as he had. A series of reports over the last few years have turned up some troubling
Oh, that's
results.
different now too.
One in 2010 urged the operating company for the tower to come up with a completely new maintenance policy. One in 2014 found cracks and rusting throughout the structure, and that only 10% of the new paint was actually adhering to the tower. Another in 2016 showed there were 885 faults, including 68 that posed serious risk to its durability. A third of the tower was set to be stripped and have 2 new coats applied.
I mean, yeah, because they're adding a lot of new stuff to the Eiffel Tower, you know, the elevators and whatnot. It definitely creates some more problems than it would have originally.
Thanks to delays caused by the pandemic and worrying levels of lead in the old paint, only 5% of the tower is now being treated. Unfortunately, experts are warning that this $64 million repaint could actually make defects in the existing layer of paint worse.
Why would you focus on repainting the entire tower when you should be focusing on the integrity and the entire, structural stuff on the Eiffel Tower? It doesn't make sense to me. Like, let's focus on the aesthetic look instead of the fact that it will get worse and worse if no one maintains it or fixes a lot of stuff that needs fixing,
resulting in more corrosion, while the operating company is nervous to close the tower for any extended periods of time. You see, the Eiffel Tower attracts some 7 million visitors and brings in nearly 100 million euros of revenue every year.
right?
And unfortunately, the operating costs can often exceed that number.
What?
Painting the tower is no easy task, and it's done in much the same...
You don't need to fucking paint the tower, you really don't. Let's get that straight. You don't need to repaint the tower. Nobody cares about the paint. Like, you still get that same amount of people going out and visiting it and paying for it without you painting the tower. It just doesn't make sense.
Same way as it was 135 years ago, with scaffolding or painters abseiling off the side of the structure. They strip, clean and apply rust proofing before adding a final coat of paint. The tower is built using puddle iron, in theory a material that could last forever as long as it's maintained and prevented from rusting. If this multi-million-dollar repaint proves to be just a band...
It will last forever as long as you make sure it lasts forever. That doesn't make sense to me.
Then it's going to be up to future Parisians
if it lasts forever,
to
it should just
ensure
last
the
forever.
integrity of the monument.
That's crazy. Was that it?
The Eiffel Tower is one of those rare structures that has transcended the rivets and bolts it's made of. It's more than just an observation structure or antenna or a glitzy monument for a long ago exhibition. It's one of the most recognisable buildings in the world. In that way, Gustave Eiffel has ended up having the last laugh against all of his critics. He was right. There is an astounding and timeless beauty in his engineering.
I would be absolutely delighted that the tower is still there after all these years, and would feel
definitely.
also partly vindicated that his life left an enduring legacy that now not just Parisians but the world loves, and would be greatly saddened if there ever came a time when the tower had to be demolished for safety reasons.
Don't forget that we're inspiring.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. Let's focus on painting the tower instead of the safety of everybody, and yeah, it doesn't make sense to me. It really doesn't. Like at all. But the B1M, the $64 million race to save the Eiffel Tower. You know, you could do it with just by not painting the tower. Simple as that. But great video, man.